Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. My name is Josh Stevens, and I'm an attorney with McMurray and Schuster. I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation on COVID-19. Now that you have work at home agents and employees, boy, we are all adjusting to this new reality. And so this is the first of a series of webinars that our firm is putting on to help you and your clients and your businesses deal with today. Just to introduce myself, I'm a senior attorney here at the firm practicing in the compliance department. My practice focuses primarily on privacy and data security, as well as teleservices and advertising and marketing. And today I am joined by Lisa Messner, one of our partners. Lisa, I'll let you introduce yourself and take over from here.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. Welcome, everyone. Looking forward to a discussion today and hoping that our firm and our knowledge can provide as a good resource base during this difficult time. I'm a partner with the law firm of McMurray and Schuster. My practice area is principally litigation. In fact, I am the practice head of our litigation department. I focus on class action defense, regulatory enforcement, and privacy, data security, and Telephone Consumer Protection Act defense and compliance. So our law firm put together this program because we ourselves are dealing with having to, in a rather very quick fashion, put all of our workforce, substantially all of it, remote. And so we start our presentation today with a look at the statistics because the speed of change on this thing is very rapid. And so interestingly, Josh and I were speaking right before the seminar started, and yesterday's statistics for COVID-19 indicated that we were in the 54,000 range with total deaths of 737. Josh indicated that Johns Hopkins today is reporting that case is now, the total cases are now in the 60,000 range with total deaths either at or exceeding 1,000. And so we're seeing that the rapid spread of this is just changing day by day. And with that comes the need for people in the workforce to be prepared for whatever may come their way. Many of us may still have essential employees reporting to our offices, and there's a myriad of issues I'm going to talk about today with that as we're guarding against the spread of this virus. So, the first and foremost consideration is for any employees who would have a need to travel. Most companies have suspended mandatory travel. If any company has an international component or owner or subsidiary, international travel has been banned in many places, including China and Europe. There aren't current travel bans within the United States. But what we are advising our clients at this time is to suspend mandatory travel if at all possible. Interestingly, I was starting to review information from the airlines that I'm getting emails on because I travel a lot for my position, indicating that they are honoring now social distancing on the airplanes. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. And I'm sure that it's something that's going to be evolving and changing over time. But that's something definitely to keep an option for. If you do have employees that are going to be called upon to have airplane travel within the United States, that is probably a reasonable option for you to look at for them in terms of social distancing on the airplane. So, with all of the speed of change and the intent to try to slow the contagion factor of this virus, there has been some new laws passed and some still in process, but one that impacts you and your workforce is the Families First Coronavirus Act. And the law does a few things, but principally it was to provide for free testing, with the intent being that if we can test and track accurate numbers of the contagion factor, it helps us to identify ways to flatten the curve. But for anybody who is manning a workforce, it's important to know that the law also requires employers with fewer than 500 employees to provide 2 weeks of paid sick leave to that employee should that employee either contract COVID-19 or have symptoms of COVID-19 or have children in schools that have closed due to COVID-19, or that person is acting as a caregiver for someone who has COVID-19. There's going to be tax credits to offset the cost of this leave for employers, but it's important to know that there are restrictions associated with this sick leave. In particular, employers cannot require any employees to find a replacement worker or to require them to use any other paid time off, vacation time, PTO, all those things cannot be used in place of this sick leave. And so that is a mandatory requirement, and it's something that you need to keep in mind. In addition, interestingly, there's some other components of this law that are just important for, I think, for people to keep in mind. It increases unemployment benefits. It's going to help the states to cover those workers who are hopefully only temporarily displaced during this time, and to help pay for the heightened unemployment insurance benefits. There's nutrition assistance, and so there's funding for people without access to food. And the principal one that we were hearing about in connection with this law was concerns that with the schools closed, there are many school-age children who actually count on school meals and lunches to be available to them for food security purposes. And so they've allotted some emergency food assistance programs that will continue through September of 2021, which is excellent. And in addition, certain households are eligible for additional assistance if their child qualified for some type of food benefit program through their school. It also provides certain waivers and expands certain WIC benefits. So the nutrition assistance piece of this is a very significant and important part of the law. So here we are in an age of pandemic and an age of remote workforce, and there may be people who are essential still working in your business. So what do you do if one of your employees gets sick? You don't panic. You send that employee home very promptly, but it raises issues, very important issues. And I know Josh is going to touch in more depth on some of these things as well, but are you able to disclose the diagnosis? What are the privacy issues? And so, it raises several concerns for employers, and in particular, the screenings that can come with identifying if someone is ill gives implications to a whole nother law, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And what's interesting is that we have the regulators staying out on front of this, and they're recognizing that in connection with the pandemic, and I think some of the fear that comes with it, that employers are not necessarily going to be thinking about the fact that certain types of things they might be asking their employees to do in this time would be considered medical screenings under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think that it's very smart for the EEOC to offer us guidance, because I don't think employers are thinking about that. They're not thinking about asking to have your temperature taken or for you to submit to a testing for COVID-19 as being medical screenings, but in fact they are. And so on March 19th, the EEOC published a fact sheet, a guidance sheet, And I'm going to go through that and give you kind of key points. We've included the link for you if you want to read. It's much more comprehensive, and the link is on these materials if you wish to find it. I'm sure you could find it through Google search also. But the key points are to remember that ADA covered employers, are able to ask employees if they experience symptoms of COVID-19. They're able to inform them of what those symptoms are, which are fever, chills, cough, shortness of breath, sore throat. Employees should maintain all information about an employee's illness, including this COVID-19 situation, within a medical record that is compliant with the ADA. That's going to have certain privacy requirements and certain confidentiality requirements. We need to remember that if one of the screenings that we're going to ask essential employees to submit to is having their body temperature taken, that is a medical exam covered by the ADA. They have acknowledged that because this is a pandemic, that employers may do that screening, but it just needs to be ADA compliant. You can also, as an employer, require your employee to stay home if they have the virus or display symptoms. Remember, you are also required to provide them with 2 weeks of paid sick leave, which we had just discussed. And you're also permitted to require them to provide to you a physician certification that they are healthy and not contagious in order to return to work. And you may screen them for the virus. And I would point out that we may have employers and people operating workforces on the call who are not covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act because they're not a large enough employer. I would caution you that many states have their own statutes that adopt the standards applicable to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and those statutes are going to cover much smaller employers. And so, for example, in Ohio, that would cover anyone who had 4 or more employees. And Ohio has case law specifically saying, essentially, whatever the ADA requires that you do, you have to do in this state if you have 4 or more employees. So a best practice here is just going to be to follow those guidelines that the EEOC is issuing as to ADA compliance, even if you are not a large enough employer to be covered by that. So developing remote working plans for your business. I am going to get ready to transition this kind of over to my colleague, Josh. And I will say that I think that Josh and I are kind of in a unique situation because we've actually watched our law firm transfer to the remote working model. And at times it feels a little bit like we want to go, okay, so now what? And so I'm going to give you a few tips for best practices, and then I'm going to turn it over to Josh to talk about privacy and the importance of making sure that during this time our employees are respecting the consumer privacy and those types of things. So remote work policies and procedures. Businesses should have something documented, and they should be communicated to the employees. Expectations should be communicated in terms of what their remote work environment would look like. I think it is also very important to watch for wage and hour violations in the remote working scenario. I think that making sure that we still have policies and procedures to require employees to log their hours of work, still to take meal periods, and still to document when they take a meal period of more than 20 minutes so that we're not running into an issue of allegations that there's unpaid time or overtime that should be compensated back to the employees. You must modify your sick and leave policies to account for the required 2 weeks of time off. And then lastly, if you are considering temporary layoffs, there are a couple different options. Some employers are being creative and actually furloughing employees so that they can continue with their health benefits. which is the biggest thing that we're hearing from workplaces that are having to make mass layoffs, is that they're laying people off in a time when that can compromise their healthcare coverage when we're in the middle of a pandemic. And so it seems like a little bit of a catch-22, but there are some creative options that you can look at with layoffs if those need to be implemented on a temporary basis. And with that, Josh, I will ask you if you can talk a little bit about privacy and some of the issues that are associated with that.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Great information. I think right now we're all kind of trying to build a car while riding in it. The work from home model, I know many businesses have had for a while for a limited number of employees, but most employees in the American workforce still go into an office or some type of work site. So when they're transitioning to working from home, one of the big things we need to think about is how do we protect the privacy of the personal information and data that the company has on its customers, and other confidential information, right? Trade secret type information that the company has. And depending on your industry, you're going to have different concerns. If you are a startup that has seasoned work from home professionals who have been doing this for, ever since the company started, that's one bucket, right? If you are a contact center that all of a sudden finds yourself needing to allow all of your agents to work from home when previously they all worked from your work site, that's a whole nother issue, right? And so every business is going to face some different areas. And your concerns are going to vary based on the types of personal information or company information that the person's going to have access to while they're off site. For example, if they're going to have access to financial information, account numbers, those sorts of things, obviously that's a higher risk. If they have access to health information or any other sensitive personal information, you're going to want to make sure you put in more stringent controls than if, say they're a marketing person and they're, working, building new ad campaigns. Not that there aren't confidential pieces of confidential information that are associated with that, but it's not the type of sensitive personal information that we often get worried about. And how do you ask your team to work together and collaborate while they're at home? Is it by phone? Is it email? Is it online chat? All these communication vehicles come with their own sets of risks and concerns. So one of the first things that you need to do, and I know many of you on the call probably had not had a chance to do this before you had to go to work from home because of how suddenly this happened. But certainly as this continues on, and the experts are saying, we may see this type of social distancing continuing well into May, it would, I think, behoove you to do a risk assessment. And what I mean by that is, first look at the information that you have collected and stored on your systems that your work from home employees are going to have access to. Check out the vulnerabilities, right? Think through, where are my risk points? Get the IT folks in, if you have a privacy officer, get them involved, get the various stakeholders involved, really think through where are my risk points. Analyze what mitigation steps you already have in place, right? What sort of controls do you have on your systems? And then work out your plan. What controls are you going to put in place? What type of mitigation are you going to beef up? And then monitor and reassess continually to make sure that that still works. So what are some of the common concerns for people working from home? Well, the first is a lack of hardened infrastructure and in the home environment, right? So in your workplace, for example, you may not have Wi-Fi, right? You may require all computers hardwire into your network. That way you don't have the vulnerability from Wi-Fi. Someone working from home, they may have an open Wi-Fi router, right, that anybody could connect to. I work primarily, just in full disclosure, I work primarily from home. I've worked from home for years. And so, here at our home, our Wi-Fi system is locked down. We also have a personal firewall that is built into our system. So, there Obviously, being a law firm, there's a lot of confidential information, so we work very hard to make sure that we have hardened infrastructure here at home, but your especially new work from home agents may not. Another thing is device encryption. If somebody's working on their own computer, that may not be encrypted. And what I mean by this is really thinking about whole drive encryption. So not just a single file, but making sure that the whole device is encrypted in case it gets lost or stolen. We've heard, and companies have been dealing for years with bring your own device policies and bring your own device issues, particularly around smartphones. But keep in mind that anytime someone is bringing their own device, that is increasing your risk that there could be ransomware or malware that's on that device that gets into your network. There are other security vulnerabilities you need to think through. So how you deal with somebody working off of their own devices is something you really got to think about. Another thing is inadvertent data access. So for example, we're giving this presentation right now, but say, I'm on a phone conversation, right? I'm producing audio in my house. If there are other people in the home, they might be able to overhear something. What about your smart home devices, right? A lot of people have these. Um, they are often constantly listening. Some of the manufacturers say that you have to say the key word in order for them to start listening, but I think we've all experienced situations where we have not, and they start listening, they respond in the middle of a conversation, right? So maybe you need to make sure that those aren't in the room where you're having your phone conversation, take them out, close the door. Hopefully they won't pick up anything. There are also settings. If you Google, you'll be able to find settings where you can turn off the ability of the companies to listen to have a human listen to those recordings. But also think about documents out in public areas of the home that somebody could just see, or unsecured removable media, right? Things like flash drives, CDs, DVDs. These are risk points that have been around for ages, but when you now have a lot of work from home agents, these become even more of a concern. Another area is your just lack of control as the business. You might have a clean desk policy. A lot of contact centers, for example, require that their agents have nothing on their desk, no phone, no paper, and that's to make sure that if somebody's giving them, say, a credit card number, they're not jotting that credit card number down somewhere that they can then go steal, and commit fraud off of that. They're putting that credit card number straight into the computer system. You're not going to have that level of control in a home environment. And also, systems may not work as efficiently in a home environment. Certainly, our firm, as Lisa alluded to over the last 2 weeks, as everybody in the firm has transitioned to work from home, we are certainly seeing the strain that all of those remote connections are putting on our systems, and we're having to increase capacity. Some people are having to get better internet speeds at home, and those sorts of things. You're going to see those inefficiencies happen. So what do we do? Well, the first thing is training. Train, train, train. I mean, your weakest point in any system is the human being. You can program, you can harden, you can put in place all kinds of wonderful tools, but if that human clicks that phishing email and gives away all their login credentials, well, there's nothing you could do about that, right? So train your employees on the types of concerns that they need to be thinking about related to, say, phishing or social engineering. Train them on steps that they can take to improve the security of their systems, such as multi-factor authentication, which I'm sure a lot of people here on the call use, where you log in online and then it sends you a text message. You have to put the number in. There are different ways to do multi-factor authentication, but it's a great tool. And also train them on how to maintain confidentiality in the home environment. So the things I was just talking about with not leaving papers out where people can see them, making sure you're not putting anything on flash drives, CDs, DVDs, closing the door, sequestering yourself away if you're having a phone call that's going to have confidential information on it. You might consider requiring the use of work-issued devices instead of personal devices, right? So you may say, well, if you're going to access the work network, it needs to be off of a work device. And on those work devices, you're going to have antivirus tools, anti-malware tools. You're probably going to have whole drive encryption. You may have other things. But you can also help employees if they want to use their own personal devices and your IT department feels comfortable with that. You can help them implement these types of tools on their personal device. Try to also use software that protects personal information, just like in the office. If you have a CRM that is really secure, make sure they're using that, right? Not putting information and sending it, through email or something. As I mentioned again, if you're using personal devices or working from home off that home Wi-Fi, make sure they know the minimum security standards. At the bare minimum, they need to have WPA2 passwords on that Wi-Fi. You might also consider implementing mobile device management tools. And so those are tools that are installed on the smartphone or tablet that gives the business the ability to manage that device and remotely lock it down if need be. Prohibit the use of public Wi-Fi unless they're connected through some sort of secure VPN, because let's face it, public Wi-Fi, it's public. Anybody could grab that information that's transiting it. Look at using VPNs and other secure network connections, right? Those virtual private networks, because they will essentially tunnel the information through a secure framework. Vet communication tools and issue approved tools lists, right? So if you're now collaborating through something like a Zoom or Teams, make sure that your IT department has vetted the tool and feels comfortable with it being used. If you're in the healthcare industry, right, there are HIPAA compliant tools that can be used, but that requires a little bit of additional investigation. Something that every company should always be doing is prohibiting the use of personal email for confidential or sensitive information. If somebody wants to send a personal email to their colleague with a picture of their puppy, that's fine, but don't be using personal email for anything that relates to the company. Maintain robust IT assistance so employees don't self-help. You might need to hire an outside IT vendor or something to give you some extra help desk support, because if employees don't feel like they're getting the support from their IT department, some of them are going to go to Google. They're going to go try to find help themselves, and they may find information that is not what you want them to have. And lastly, document those policies and procedures, train on them, and drill them. Right now we're going through a crisis and businesses are having to adjust, but when things calm back down, schedule every 6 months or every year, you have a day where everybody works remote and you see if your systems can handle it, what works, what doesn't work, right? Do that drilling to make sure that you can continue to support your employees. What the main takeaway that I want you to have from this is working from home. Right now, we're doing it in a crisis. A lot of people are working from home for the first time. I have a feeling, and a lot of commentators that I've seen have a similar thought, that this is probably going to be the beginning of a transition to more and more people working from home on a long-term basis, as businesses recognize the efficiencies that can come from it. Millennials, my generation, we want it. We like the flexibility. So while we're adjusting in the crisis, also try to be thinking about the long term and how do you make work from home a sustainable option going forward. And so with that, I'd like to thank you. We are keeping these webinars to about 30 minutes. We're not going to have a Q&A during the webinar, but if you have any questions at all or want to bounce ideas, anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to Lisa or myself. Our contact information is on the screen. This is something that a lot of businesses are dealing with here in the moment. I also just want to give a quick plug. We have 3 more of these webinars, at least 3 more planned. Next Thursday will be Now's a Good Time to and then dot, dot, dot. But that one is going to be about dusting off those policies and procedures for compliance. And we're going to talk about the types of things that you need to be thinking about for those policies and procedures. April 9th, we're going to have a great conversation about advertising laws that are implicated by COVID-19, but also how you can structure your marketing and advertising maybe in a slightly more aggressive posture to continue improving sales and mitigating the economic harm that you're feeling right now. And lastly, on April 16th, we're going to have a survey of class actions and really walk through what we're seeing out there in the litigation world and what businesses need to be thinking about for it. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, wish you all the best, and hopefully we will see you next Thursday. Bye-bye.